hope you're having a beautiful day. This is Meridian Grace, and I'm here in Austin for our Awakening Health Show. And we have a lot of interesting things and shifts and changes to share with you. And I'm going to start off real simple and take us into some things that are a bit more complex and talk to you about some things that are very, very deep. So let's start with something that we can all do to help to protect ourselves in our homes and support our health. We've talked many, many times about the harmful effects of EMFs. And now that the temperature is getting cooler, I encourage you all, whenever you're sitting in front of a computer, to also have a scarf on. A scarf that will cover your thyroid. Because our thyroid is right in the line of direct radiation in front of computers, and oftentimes as well when we're talking on cell phones. And so a scarf helps to break that EMF process. For many years I was thinking that the only thing that might help would be to buy the special cloth that they use to make sleep sanctuaries. It has silver threads in it, or, which I could never handle myself, using aluminum foil around your neck. And my thought was, well, you could put cotton first of all around your neck, and then you could use aluminum foil. And I suppose if my thyroid were in terrible, terrible shape and nothing seemed to be helping, I might consider doing that. But now we can just use scarves, and that's a helpful way to do things. But I would also recommend that you might look into buying some fabric that's actually a silver thread fabric, and making yourself a special scarf that you keep by your computer that you can use for whenever you're in front of the computer. And you can place that around your neck. For you fashionistas, having all kinds of beautiful scarves is another way to go. You can buy beautiful scarves of many different colors and textures and things like that. Of course, I would love to see them being real fibers. I'm really fortunate in that I have a neighbor who does a lot of weaving, and she makes me the most beautiful scarves, and she even made me a Rwanda that she hand loomed. Those are really, really special, but they're quite warm, so I tend to wear those in the winter time. But whatever you have, it's better than nothing. So the best of all, I believe, would be to use the fabric with the silver threads. And then if you don't have that, you can go ahead and make yourself or use whatever beautiful scarves you have around. And I would imagine that even a synthetic one would be better than nothing. But I can't say that for certain. I don't have research on that part, but we do want to protect our necks. So here's the kind of rule of thumb. During the day when you're out in the sun, you want to wear as little as possible. When you have natural light, as little as possible, unless, of course, you're in front of a computer. And at night, if you have unnatural light from even incandescent bulbs, then what you want to do is cover your body up and have a scarf on. Because we are affected by the LED lights that most of us are using these days, and any unnatural lighting. So we can think of native light as natural light, and everything else is junk light. And if you're in junk light, you want to protect yourself from it. Because all of the latest research shows that we have receptors in all of the cells of our skin that speak through a process called photons, light communication, to our brains, and intercellularly and interorgan-wise and intersystem-wise. So through light, our whole body communicates. We're made of light. And having real light, native light, is what heals us. So as a little reminder, being outside in the morning for the sunrise, and half an hour or so is one of the best times, but before 10 in the morning, it's a really great time to be outside and get the morning light so that you have more of a full spectrum of all the beautiful colors of light, and there's plenty of ultraviolet and plenty of red. As the day goes on, it's not quite as good, and we've found that when people go out in the morning, they are able to handle afternoon sun without getting sunburned. And the people who do the morning sunlight, also, even if their job or their work keeps them outdoors all day, they would tend not to get skin cancers, according to a number of scholarly studies, and just looking at the effects of sunlight on skin cancer. So as long as you get that first morning light, you can be out as long as you want, you just don't want to burn. And I recommend that if you're getting to that point where your skin is getting pink, instead of using any kind of an unnatural skin sun protection, SPF or sun protection device or cream, that you just put on clothing. So even if it's hot outside, you can get a very thin cotton shirt and hat, but never use sunglasses, because our eyes are so important, and the sunglasses actually create an unhealthy light going into your eyes, whereas the beauty of the sun is very healing to us. And if you do wear glasses to be able to see, please take some time when you don't need to be using them to sit outside in the sun and take them off, so that you can get the sun unadulterated by lenses of any kind. Now I have a pair of glasses on my head. I tend to carry them on my head with me because I'm always kind of getting a thought and going and researching something on the computer. So I have them with me, and I can just put these on so that I'm not getting the harmful effects from the computer. And I also will take my computer and search something, download called IRIS. And IRIS is probably one of the best for protecting you from the harmful effects of the blue light. Now, what about the electricity from the rooms and things like that in the walls? And all of these things have harmful effects. And we start piling them on top of each other. Radio waves, microwaves, it just goes on and on and on. There's so many different types of EMFs in the world now, electricity running through our walls. And, but when we add to it 5G, we have really added something quite nasty, or a cell phone, and especially the smartphones. We can use devices, I'm not sure where mine is, but it's quite shocking. One of these days I'll pull it out and we'll grab a cell phone, and I'll show you the difference between having your cell phone in airplane mode or having it on, and then what happens when you actually make a call. The numbers just practically go off the chart. So it's really important, if you're going to be wearing a cell phone on your body, that you either have it off or in airplane mode. And you'll just have to get into the habit of checking it every now and again. I basically just turn mine off because I don't use it for lots of different things when I'm out of the house, other than to check messages and to text somebody who might be in trouble or need some help. So I'll just leave it off instead of in airplane mode. I guess it depends on your cell phone, but it seems just as easy for me to turn it back on as it is for me to turn the airplane mode on and off. So it's just a suggestion. And please, women, please do not put those cell phones in your bra. And men, really, your front pocket, you're asking for trouble. You're setting yourself up for, all kinds of potential issues with your sexual functioning and all the rest of it. So just if you possibly can, keep it off your body. In my car, I have a little magnet thing. It's turned off, but I just put it on there so that it's not on my body. In the house, I typically keep it in a room that I'm not in all the time, and but loud enough ringer so I can hear it. And I do leave it on during the day when I'm at home, so that I can hear phone calls when they come in and texts when they come in. But please spare yourself the exposure directly to different parts of the body. There's so much research that I was even looking at like 25 years ago from Germany, where they showed the incredible increase of brain cancers when people used the cell phone on the ear, putting it right up to their ears, and also an incredible increase in the percentage of people with cancers on the location where they carry their cell phone on their body. So we need to be smart about these things. And for me, one of the biggest things is let's look at what's real in nature. And obviously, this whole thing with EMFs and computers is not. But we've all, including myself, really basically become accustomed to these things and seem to really need them. So if you can, download different articles that you might want to read, and then turn your Wi-Fi off on your computer and just read the articles from your download, and then you can dump them if you need to, and if they're important enough, you can print them. I hate the idea of wasting paper, but I'd much rather waste paper than waste your brain. And I just feel it's really, really important that we look at these things and start doing our very best to live as close to a natural lifestyle as possible. So, to give you an idea of what my latest experiment on my own body is, I am about 2 weeks into what's called a carnivore diet. I am trying this because after being really diligent with intermittent fasting for all this time, and doing a good year of not even eating blueberries, just keeping my carbs down to between 20 and 50, doing a ketogenic diet, I was still having problems with high blood sugar and loose stool issues, which I've had all my life. It seems to have been maybe in some way associated with our family history. We have, my sister has Crohn's disease, and celiac seems to be a part of our family. And I had colon cancer years ago. So it seems to be part of that whole picture. Well, I am so blown away because very quickly my blood sugars went from running between 120 and 145 down to the 70s and 80s, which has not happened for years. And my husband, who is quite an amazingly gifted medical doctor, and I were just really kind of digging in there. We were going to start doing all kinds of glucagon tests, and we already were doing insulin and blood tests where we actually we checked first my blood sugar and my insulin level. We did the whole test over a few hour period of time, where I first of all was in a fasted state, then I took a sugar load, and then we watched the changes in my blood sugar and insulin over a number of hours. that didn't seem to give us terribly much information, although it looked like I may actually have been partially not producing enough insulin from my islet cells in my pancreas. But here I am, totally balancing out right now. Also, many of you may remember that I had an anoxic event with my surgery. I had a bicuspid aortic valve instead of a normal one, and it was quite stenosed, meaning a bunch of calcium made it very hard for blood to pass through it, so much so that my cardiologist was afraid that if any tiny more molecule or two were to get in there, I might just not be able to pass any blood through that aortic valve at all. So we went ahead, and I have a little cow valve in my aorta now. It's a little cow aortic valve. And during that process, it appears that there was a period of time when I didn't have enough oxygen and lost so much memory. So for the last few years, I have been on a quest to get my brain back. And that's when I found the ketogenic diet, which helped quite a bit. And doing all kinds of special herbs from all over the world, bacopa, and well, just on and on. I think we've talked about all this before. But I am totally shocked at the difference in my brain function, my concentration levels, the amount of time I can read really complex, difficult materials and actually assimilate them since I've been doing this carnivore diet. And also, typically after 4 or 5 in the evening, I did not want to do anything intellectual, and I found myself doing some of my best studying in the last few evenings for hours in really complex pathways and genetics and things like that late into the evening, which was really quite shocking to me. So what is a carnivore diet? A carnivore diet is the typical diet of most of our ancestors during the winter time, when there is no fruit and no vegetables available. I am of Northern European descent. Maybe many of you are as well. And in Northern European countries, at this time of year, the world is covered with snow. And the only real food that's available is animal food. So all I'm doing is I'm eating meat or fish and butter. Actually, I'm using ghee, homemade ghee from grass-fed butter. The meat I'm eating is all grass-fed. The fish is wild-caught. And I'm not using chicken because I'm really questioning the quality of chicken these days because of the issues with the corn that they're being fed, and even the natural ones, unless they're actually really pecking for a number of generations, and that's what their food is. So I'm going that direction. I'm eating some organ meats, and of course water and salt. And I haven't really even gone into taking a lot of minerals like I was doing before, but I am taking one form of mineral, which in a way is an animal product. It's called plankton. So plankton is actually these one-celled little creatures in the ocean that whales eat. And it turns out that they are loaded with all the minerals. So I've been eating plankton, and just a small amount every day to make sure that I have all the minerals that I need. And I have been drinking some tea with ghee in it. So that's what I've been doing. And my energy is great. My mental clarity is there. My blood sugar is balancing. And for looking into it research-wise, the people who've been doing this for as many as 10 years or so talk about their eyesight getting better, their hearing getting better, their hair growing back in, their skin becoming beautiful. Previous skin conditions would go away, but some of the biggest things is it's the people with autoimmune disease who have not been able to find an answer in any other way seem to have cleared up doing this. And also people with severe depression and anxiety seem to find that within a very short period of time, they're no longer anxious or depressed. So I'm not saying that this diet is for everyone. I'm just saying that it's worth a try. And it's good to know that, especially if you've been eating a normal American diet with all kinds of carbohydrates and toxins and preservatives and things like that, or even if you've just been eating a healthy all-carb diet, or not all, but carbohydrate-rich diet, that it's very possible as you go through the metabolic shifts to be able to fully digest, utilize the meat and the fat for your for all of your body's functions, that you will be releasing a lot of toxins from the byproducts of the glycolysis, or the breaking down of sugars that you had to do previously. And many people will go through a period of a few weeks of not feeling well. I was very fortunate in that I was already in slight ketosis. My numbers, I use a blood glucometer and ketone reader in the mornings. And my numbers were running between 0.2 and 0.5 for my ketones in my previous diet. And now they're more like 2.5 to 2.8, which is in real ketosis. I mean, that is solid ketosis. Now, I do my best to be out in the sun as much as possible every day. We haven't had any to speak of, and we had quite a bit of rain recently, so I wasn't outside when it was raining. But I still try and get outside to at least take a walk. It's too cold for me right now to be out in my little bikini, which I do a lot, when there's no sun. I found that I can be out there when there's sun, even when it's cold, because if I'm close to the ground, I can really warm up. But I do recommend that you are out in the sun barefooted, or I found a new answer for us as far as getting shoes that actually have leather bottoms. It's, I think, perhaps easier for men to find these types of shoes, although they're very expensive. But when I was in Santa Fe recently, I was visiting with my son, and his girlfriend is half Navajo. And she was actually making a pair of traditional Navajo moccasins for her daughter. And these moccasins actually have a thick rawhide bottom and then a leather top. And so you can actually get traditional Navajo moccasins, and over time they will completely conform to your feet. There is a company that is making them by size, but I highly recommend, if you can afford it, that you look for someone who can actually make one specific for your foot. I just purchased some, and I'm really having a challenge making them work for me. They fit, but there are places in them that are quite hard, and you have to really spend a lot of time bending them and things, and I'm working with wearing thick socks and little by little getting to the point where I can wear them all day. But why am I making such a big deal about these moccasins? I love to hike, and all my hiking shoes are rubber bottomed. And this would be a way to actually receive the healing benefits from the magnetism of the earth by wearing these leather moccasins. And most moccasins that you find have a very thin sole, and it would be, for me, very uncomfortable to be walking over stones and rock and gravel and things like that. But these rawhide ones are so thick, and they are wonderful for hiking. And my son's girlfriend is actually wearing hers for all kinds of hiking. We went hiking up to 10,000 feet, and I couldn't believe how well I did. When I was younger, I couldn't do that because the elevations would really get to me. I think it was because of the aortic valve that I had no idea was a problem. And so I don't have the aortic issues, but I now also have the energy and stamina from doing the carnivore diet. So it's been a good thing for me. And I think it's just so wild that for so many years I was a raw food vegan and a vegetarian, and ending up with colon cancer after being a raw food vegan for years. And here I am now, a carnivore, and finding that I'm the healthiest I've ever been. For me, it's about letting go of isms, and that's hard for me. But I've learned I had to do that, letting go of any kind of conceptual idea about what we have to do, and letting our bodies and our hearts really show us the way. And when I first heard of the idea of carnivore diet, I thought it was absolutely nuts. But as I've learned more and more about how plants have very special chemical components inside of them to protect them, because they can't get up and run away, they can only stay put where they are. And these amazing complex survival techniques that they have. Some of them for insects is quite amazing, where they'll create all kinds of things like spots on their leaves to make it look like there's already another insect has come and laid its eggs there, and if they were to lay their eggs there on that leaf, there wouldn't be enough food for their babies as well. I mean, just all kinds of really amazing things that they do. But there are different chemicals, and when people have autoimmune disease, they can be extremely sensitive to chemicals that are not typically a problem for us. There's a term called hormesis, which I believe we've spoken about in the past, and the idea that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And so we are designed to get small amounts of these chemicals when nature provides them. Most of the vegetables that we eat are not vegetables that nature provided, but they're hybrids that humans have. And there are many very unusual chemical components to them. But probably, if you were healthy, that wouldn't be any kind of problem whatsoever. But the idea of eating the same vegetables, making a green drink. Remember, I was so into making these green smoothies. And taking the same vegetables every morning and throwing them into a high-speed blender and blending them up. And some of the vegetables I was using in the beginning were things that are very hard on the thyroid. They're goitrogens, like kale and chard and broccoli. You know, they're very different if you cook them, but if you take them raw and you eat them raw, they can contribute to a hypothyroid. And people are doing this every day, thinking that they're doing something really good for themselves. But in nature, everything has a cycle. We all see our own cycles. I mean, we have times of the day when we might be, much happier or much more tired. Some people wake up just ready to go, and other people take a while to get going. You know, so we have our own cycles during a day, during a month, during a season, during the year. And nature has never set it up in such a way that something like kale or chard or whatever is available all year long. So if we start to take our cues from nature, we'll be in a much better shape to actually have a metabolic balance in our bodies. Because nature has evolved us for survival. And so when we eat what nature provides in the different times of the year, it's a very, very wonderful healing thing. So I'm starting out with this right now because I think if you're dealing with serious challenges to your health, it's worth trying something simple like this. I have been studying really deeply on and off for about a year, but I just took another really deep dive into something called CIRS. People call it CIRS. And what that stands for is Chronic Inflammatory Response Disease. And that's when people have a situation going on in their body where they have a chronic illness. And typically, it's not just one area. In order for someone to be called a CIRS person, they typically have symptoms in at least 3 of 13 categories. So I'm going to talk to you about this because typically these symptoms can be extraordinarily debilitating. And if you've been one of those people who have been going from practitioner to practitioner, reading everything you can online, and doing, intensive detox program or an intensive liver flush program or this or that or the other, and have not gotten better, there's a possibility that you may be a CIRS person. And typically, the people that have this have one or more of the major HLA-DR genes. That's a mouthful. But this is a type of gene that predisposes you to a difficulty in being able to move serious toxins out of the body, and also predisposes you to inflammatory conditions in the brain, which then affect the whole body. So I've been one of those people who've been studying for years how the gut affects everything. But I hadn't really realized to what degree the brain can affect the gut, and the brain can affect the whole body. So I've known about that emotionally, I've known about that mentally, but I haven't really known about that on a toxicity level and on a nervous system level, how nerve issues in the brain can profoundly affect the whole body and contribute to major disease. So for those of us who have been living in high EMFs situations, who might be living in high-rises, who have these HLA-DR genes, it's very possible that for you, you are even more sensitive than the average person. That you find that simple things can really set you off. The smell of perfume, walking by a golf course that's been sprayed with pesticides. I mean, there's so many things that can very deeply and profoundly affect you. And so I am honestly, seriously hoping that something as simple as and inexpensive as doing a carnivore diet can be an answer for you. But if it's not, there are amazing doctors now who have been treating CIRS. And typically, people with CIRS have either major mold experiences, and like 50% of the buildings in the United States, we assume, and I think that's quite low, honestly, have been water damaged and have mold. And it's not so much the mold itself that is a problem, but the mycotoxins that are microscopic, that come off the mold and get into the air and infiltrate everything in the house. Your clothing, your books, your walls, all of your utensils, your kitchen stuff, everything gets affected by these mycotoxins, which can trigger a brain on fire inflammatory response. And that brain on fire can affect any part of the body. So let's talk about the 13 different categories. And if you have symptoms in 8 of them, that is a very strong indicator that you could be a CIRS person. And I'm going to show you a simple, inexpensive test that you can do. I have it here. And I'm also going to talk to you about some really amazing levels of technology that are available to us now. But this testing starts to get profoundly expensive, and but can save your life and give you a life back. Not the testing, of course, but following through. And there is a really important step-by-step order of how to remediate your house and remediate your body. It's quite an interesting process. So, one of the big ones is fatigue. Sometimes fatigue to the point where you only have an hour a day where you can handle being up and doing anything. But it doesn't have to be that strong. It can just be a much greater experience of fatigue than you have experienced in the past. And doesn't seem to make any sense, where you have very, very little time during the day when you can be productive. Another one is all different types of headaches. Migraines, cluster headaches, strong headaches, also from being in certain environments, recognizing headaches. Aches and pains. These are all different categories. So the third category is aches and pains and cramps, and that don't seem to make any sense. It's not like you, fell and sprained your ankle and your ankle hurts, but I'm talking about aches in different parts of your body, shooting pains, all different types of strange sensations of aching, cramping, pain that doesn't seem to make any sense. Also, this is another category, unusual sharp or claw-like or electrical type experiences where you can also feel like something's crawling on your skin or inside of your skin, weird tingling sensations, neuropathies where you don't feel your feet or your hands or different parts of the body. There's also a really interesting one where you seem to get shocked all the time. I remember when we were kids, we used to, rub our feet against the carpeting and then we would give each other static electricity shocks. But this is different. I mean, this is where you can get shocked anytime you touch any metal or anything like that. It's really a number of people who, if you have that, it's pretty likely that you're a CIRS person. There's coughing, sinus problems, respiratory issues, all of those fit into one category. Abdominal pains. People complain about that a lot, where they have aches and pains in their abdomen. Weird ones, and if you know that you have a sensitivity to a certain food, and every time you eat that food you get an abdominal pain or a bloating, that's one thing. But to get these strange abdominal pains, a lot of the time, that happens to be another one. Also, part of that would include a secretory diarrhea. And then joints, in particular, that early morning stiffness, where you get out of bed and you're really stiff and achy, and it takes a while walking around until that stiffness goes away. And that can be in your back, that can be in your legs, it can be in your knees, it can be anywhere. But joint pain, particularly where the stiffness comes after a period of inactivity, you could notice that being in a car, where after you've been driving in a car for half an hour or an hour, you move like an old person when you get out of the car. And then there's the whole arena of brain issues, executive brain functions, cognition, being able to learn, memory, where you're especially forgetting most recent memories, weird assimilation of information, confusion, disorientation. Mood is another whole area, and appetite being really strange, sweats, temperature regulation being a big issue for you, where you get hot or cold really easily, really cold hands and feet. All of that is another category. The other one, the idea of the shocks, has a lot to do with one of our hormones that regulates our fluid in the body. So thirst and having to pee all the time, where you're basically getting dehydrated. The people who are constantly going to the bathroom. And if you have that and you also can do this shock thing with people, that's a really strong indicator. We talked about numbness and tingling, loss of taste, vertigo, spinning and tremors, and then there's a really unusual one where people can quickly gain weight without doing any changes, as much as 30 to 60 pounds, where the brain on fire activity has affected their leptin, and their leptin rises way out of control. They become completely leptin insensitive, and they just gain all this weight out of nowhere, and they can't lose it. So those are the categories. And if you find that you have 8 of those categories, or major symptoms in 8 of those categories, it might be a good idea to start exploring the possibility of being one of those people with a chronic inflammatory response syndrome. Now, the interesting thing for so many people, especially like around this area of mold, is that they may have lived in a moldy house all their lives, and then they have a car accident, or maybe they're playing football and they get or a basketball hits them in the head. And then after that incident, and there's many different things that can happen, but there is an incident that kind of shocks the system, and then it begins an inflammatory cascade. And that inflammatory cascade can start this whole CIRS process, especially, really only if you have one of those HLA-DRs that are particularly susceptible to this chronic inflammatory condition that just will not shut off. Inflammation is a really important thing for us, and it helps to protect us after an injury. It brings red blood cells to an area. It's never any fun. It can create fever and redness and swelling and pain. But if you're healthy, that stops. If you're not healthy and you have one of these genes in particular, then you could potentially, especially if everything else or many things that are supposed to be in place in your life are not, if you're living a totally unnatural lifestyle, then it's much more likely that a CIRS event could be how your body is trying to save you. It thinks that you're constantly under attack, and it's constantly creating an inflammatory condition to protect you, and it makes your life miserable. So there are a number of ways to explore this. One of the first things, of course, is to look and see if you have these kinds of symptom patterns, if you've been to many different practitioners and doctors, if doctors may have told you that it's all in your head, that you're nuts, that this is crazy, those sorts of things, and you've gotten no relief. Your doctors may have given you numerous different types of drugs and you've still gotten no relief. Then this might be an area that you want to look into more. And mold is a huge one. Many of our schools are loaded with mold, and our children are in them all day long, and then they have an added insult of fluorescent tube lights, which are extremely hard on the brain and extremely hard on the body. It's one of the worst non-native lights there is. Many office buildings also are filled with mold. And if you have to go to work every day in one of these office buildings, it can be really a challenge. So there's a test called an EMFs test. It's basically a test that's designed to look for the genes, the genetics of mold and many other different types of toxic things that might be in your house. And instead of trying to grow mold on a plate, which is not very accurate, what you do is you use these little swabs and you do them in about 10 different places in the house, like at the top of your door jambs, just in high places, on top of areas, like on top of a high shelf where you may not have thought to dust. And you get 10 samples and you send them in. And if the level's higher than 2, then you can be pretty certain that you have a moldy house. And there's a lot that one needs to look into about that. When it comes to CIRS, you may not be in a moldy environment now, but you may have lived in one for a long time in the past. CIRS can also be triggered by like a brown recluse spider bite that you may have recently or in the past. It can be triggered by Lyme disease, and many times people might actually have cleared their Lyme, and they're still having horrible symptoms, and they're not from the Lyme, they're from the CIRS. So it gets very, very complicated, but there are ways to ascertain all these things by amazing testing. And one of the newest exciting tests is a type of a genetic test that's actually looking for the genes that are turned on. So the 23andMe has been used to see what genes we were born with, but we don't know if those genes are active or not. If our lifestyle or whatever has made them activated and causing problems. But there is a test that actually tests for what genes are turned on. And that shows us what things we actually need to work with. That's a very expensive test. It's a $1,500 test. Some places $1,700. But that test will actually help once you get a little further down the line in ascertaining that actually CIRS is an issue for you. So what's something that you can do that's very inexpensive? That is a VCS test. So we've talked about how with CIRS the brain is on fire, and the optic nerve is profoundly affected if you have CIRS. This is a little test card that we place 18 inches away from you, and your eyesight needs to be 20/50. So it doesn't matter if you wear glasses or contacts, you can leave them in. We're not trying to test your ability to read letters or anything like that. What we're looking at is your ability to discern the difference of variations in contrast. So as you can see here by looking at this card, we have varying shades of gray, light and dark, and they get closer and closer and closer together in each of the lists. So what we have you do is to place an eye patch on. I guess I can go ahead and do that. And then we'll place the card inside of this holder right here. And this helps us to know exactly how far away the card is, and this is set up to be 18 inches. And then we start going through the card. I'm going to take this off and show you the card one more time. You'll see how there's a movement on like this A1 to the left, and on B1 straight up and down, and on 3A off to the right. So as you go through this, there are varying degrees of contrast, and your ability to see these lets us know if you are experiencing some optic nerve damage, and the specific lines help us to discern whether you are a CIRS person or not. And this test has been done with thousands of people with CIRS. And we found that in 80%, the people show that if they have CIRS, which is tested, that they will fail this test. And 20% of the people who have it will still have it, but they can actually pass the test. But it's much more, it's a very inexpensive way to do a first level screening for CIRS, of course, after looking at your symptom pattern. So that's one of the wonderful ways that we have to explore that possibility. And then there's quite an amazing panel of all kinds of blood work. And honestly, if you would like to look into these issues more, I highly recommend that you look at YouTube's with probably Dr. Andrew Heyman. He's going to be a lot easier to follow than the person who I have to pay homage to, which is Dr. Richie Schumacher, who has isolated this major issue. So we find, and he also has some YouTubes and a website called survivingmold.com. He's very clearly a medical doctor and tends to use far more meds in his work with helping people to clear CIRS than Dr. Heyman does, who is a medical doctor also, but started his career in shiatsu and a much more of an orientation towards alternative medicine. So he's always looking for answers in the supplement arena and herbal arena that will do similar things to the meds. So if it is true that you are a CIRS person, what they have shown over numerous years is that you can't just jump in and do everything all at once. You have to prepare for instance, the membranes of your cells first before you go on to doing other things. And you can also help with clearing toxins out of the brain with specific substances that you can spray into your nose. So there's quite an elaborate process of step-by-step, making sure that you've completed the first step before you go to the second. And there has been so much that's shown that if you don't follow the steps and jump to like step number 3 before you start number 1, you can just make yourself that much sicker and increase the amount of time to getting well. It's rare for someone to be fully functional again within 6 months, but it does happen. And typically we're talking a year to 2 years of intensively working through the different steps of healing for someone to get well in this fashion. So you can see why I'm hoping that possibly returning to following nature's dictates would be the easier way to go. Some people say, oh my God, I could never give up my tres leches or my French fries or my potato chips or whatever. But if you are willing to take a deep dive into lifestyle, I think it would be a very worthwhile adventure to see if we can actually get there by doing sunlight and removing as much EMFs as possible, turning off Wi-Fi if you have it in the house at night, wiring a hardline telephone in the house and using that as much as possible and barely using your cell phone. Maybe stepping down from a new cell phone and smartphone to a very simple phone that just does very simple things like text and phone calls alone and doesn't have internet on it and all the rest of it. I mean, these sorts of things can help to reduce the negative impact on a hypersensitive body with those types of genes that are profoundly affected by stress of many different forms and create an ongoing inflammatory cascade. So that's my message for you today. I hope you found it interesting. I'd love to hear any comments. Please feel free to email me at meridiangrace@gmail.com. Please check out our website at awakeninghealth.com, and if you go to the media section, you'll see the YouTubes that we are starting to create a library of. And I wanted to let you know that I'm hoping that very soon I'll be doing an interview of Phil Escott, who has quite an amazing history of autoimmune disease himself, and beginning as a vegan and trying everything. And he's been a carnivore now for 10 years, and he's totally healthy and never thought that was going to be possible in the past. So he's quite a researcher. He's worked with many, many people, and we'll be talking with him about different diagnoses that people may have received and the people that he knows who have recovered and a bit about their stories. So hopefully that will be of great interest to you, as it is to me. So I thank you so much for joining us. I thank you for your open mind. I know it's asking a lot for many of us who've been long-time meditators and have come from a background where it was considered not a spiritual thing to do, or maybe even spiritually harmful to eat animals, to listen to me talking about this. But I do believe that we were given these precious gifts of these extraordinary bodies to carry our precious souls and beings around to give us an experience of life. And if we can, through great gratitude and thanks to the animal beings that give their lives to us, receive those gifts and get well, then that is truly a blessing. So, and from my point of view, we're giving the animal kingdom an opportunity to heal us, we're lifting the animal kingdom this way as well. So their service to us is a great, great blessing. And I am certainly not condoning the use of factory-raised animals at all, the horrible atrocities that happens to them, and also the incredible health problems there are from eating them because of their hormones, the GMOs, their emotional state, not being loved on or cared for, being able to be in their natural environment, being kept out of the precious sunlight, which is so as important for them as it is for us. So, one of the things that I think is a valuable thing to consider is that having grown up Jewish, there's a whole kosher process of slaughtering animals. And having been a Sufi for a long time, there's a whole halal way of slaughtering animals. And a big part of that is to pray over the animal first and to take their life in a way that they don't realize it's happening. So they slit the throat, or they might, these days, like quickly put some type of special bullet through the head that just knocks them out, and then slit the throat and bleed them. They hang them upside down. So it's a challenge to do that with cows. You have to have very special equipment. But there are people that have that equipment who are providing kosher and halal meat. For years, I purchased all my meat from halal meat markets. They're quite far from me. They're pretty much all in North Austin, and I live in South Austin. It'd take me an hour to get there. But I would buy almost all my meat through them. But I couldn't ascertain for sure that they were being grown on really clean grass, but they were outdoors. And they were typically from much smaller types of farms, and they would butcher one animal at a time. They were never sent to feedlots or anything like that. And so that's an important consideration if you are concerned about the adrenaline that the animal might be receiving. But there's a beautiful prayer that goes along with it, and I should look that up and see if I can get a translation for the prayer that's offered for the soul of the animal and its sacrifice. So, I just am grateful that this information is coming to the forefront now, and that for those of us who are meant to experience this type of healing, that we have it. So thank you again, and have an extremely beautiful day. May you be blessed beyond measure with vitality